As a college student educated at a small southern liberal arts school, a cohort of renowned southern writers figured prominently in my academic education. William Faulkner, Flannery O'Connor, Eudora Welty, James Agee, Tennessee Williams, many others. Several had ties to Sewanee in Tennessee, my alma mater, which made their writing all the more intriguing to me. Last week, I came across a long-forgotten short story by Eudora Welty, which she entitled, "A Visit for Charity." I commend it to you. Beyond painting scenes so vividly that you can almost step into them as a reader, Welty's great gift, in my way of thinking, was situating her characters in strange settings where they must find their way without the usual familiar landmarks. Their wilderness experiences are lent to readers as parables. Parables literally means cast alongside our lives, so that they might offer insights into our own journeys. And in this story by Welty, 14-year-old Marion is a Girl Scout in search of a community service act which will earn her a new badge. She goes to the nursing home, checks in at the nurse's station and says, "I need to see an old lady." The nurse promptly delivers her to a room where there are two old ladies. But once there, Marion becomes so disoriented and tongue-tied that she struggles to engage the women before her. They end up doing most of the talking, barraging her with questions, and then carrying on their own conversation between the two of them, because this is familiar territory for them. One of the women asks Marion, "Have you come to be our little girl for a while?" Marion is undone and doesn't answer. After a time, the other woman bleats a shrill, unfiltered inquiry, "Who are you?" The problem is that Marion is so out of sorts, she has forgotten her own name. She doesn't know who she is. And after a few moments, she flees the room in horror, making her way back down the hallway of the nursing home with bulging linoleum such that it feels like she's walking on waves, past the nurse's station where the nurse that let her in is now perusing a hunting magazine of all things. And then she goes out into the sunshine, metaphorical sunshine, right? Where she gets her bearings, flags the bus down, gets on to flee from this ordeal. Have I piqued your interest? A Visit for Charity. It's available online. The point is, friends, when we find ourselves in the unfamiliar territory of chaotic wilderness, and can we just agree that we are in a time of chaotic wilderness? It is easy to forget who we are. This is really the heart of Lent, really the heart of the gospel story this morning. Jesus, out in the desert with the devil, is at risk of losing himself. Because at their core, all of Satan's questions are really asking, "Who are you, Jesus? Who are you really?" But Jesus has just come up out of the waters of his baptism, where he heard the voice from heaven proclaim, "You are my beloved. You are beautiful and good and true." And that is sustenance enough for Jesus to find his way through the famishing 40-day journey, 40 days being the biblical way of saying a really long time. Long enough to arrive at some newfound wisdom about oneself. This theme runs through all of our scriptures this morning. Who are you really? The ancient Israelites in the passage from Deuteronomy are instructed to tell the story of their salvation with enough courage and conviction that it gets down into their bones in a way that they will remember who they really are, no matter how long they have to wander in the desert, no matter how beleaguered they may become. And the psalmist invites us to sufficiently step into the scene of divine embrace to feel the embodied goodness that surrounds us always, whether we know it or not, and especially when we lose our bearings, because we inevitably will, because that's just a part of life. And then Paul tells the church in Rome, and by extension us here this morning, that we will lose our way every time if we do not ground ourselves in the story of Jesus Christ, who becomes for us the living Word by which everything makes sense. The living and life-giving Word which imbues our lives with such grace that we cannot help but share His good news, not only with our lips, but in our lives. Words matter, friends. Words matter as we learn who we are really and how we tell our story and let it guide us on the journey. It is how we find our way. Words matter. Which reminds me of another Southern writer, Wendell Berry, whose wisdom I did not stumble upon until years after I left college, but whose writings have the sort of timeless energy about them that I find them uncannily applicable to our current crisis. Wendell Berry wrote a heady essay 42 years ago he entitled "Standing by Words." Standing by words. And here's the crux of his proposition in his essay, that there is a definitive connection between the use of fraught words to spew disinformation into the public discourse and the very real and tragic disintegration of our communities, our families, our neighborhoods, our cities, our nation, the global human community. We are at risk of losing sense of who we are. I went back and read Wendell Berry's essay this past week. It was sobering and prescient, to say the least, because it could have been written with our current plight precisely in mind. Here's what he suggests. For words to provide a pathway to beauty and goodness and truth, and for those to be familiar attributes by which communities will find our way together, words must serve not only the one saying them, but also those who receive and hear them. Berry says, if we weaponize our words, we degrade and do violence to the whole of humanity, including ourselves. We must be responsible in our wordsmithing, responsible not only to the convictions of our own hearts, but also taking care and concern for the well-being of everyone else in society. And let's just be clear, friends, just because someone else doesn't value that reality doesn't give us license to degrade and do violence in our own response. Berry suggests instead we would do well to make a promise to bind ourselves to another's future. Promise to bind ourselves to another's future. That is not a transactional endeavor, a quid pro quo, but rather one born of unselfish hope for all of humanity. Now, this is hard work, folks. It is most certainly the harder road to follow. But I am convinced that we come to this church not just for solace, but for strength too. strength to love in the face of enmity, as Martin Luther King Jr. preached, strength to stoke the fires of mercy, as Mary Ann Buddy did 6 weeks ago, even when others are running roughshod over their victims. Strength to use our words for good, that humanity might just have a glimmer of hope to find our way through the wilderness of this season. Who are we really? This is the question for the Lenten journey. This is the question for the church in this time. And Jesus has the words we need to find our way. Remember who you are. Speak your healing words into this broken world. Let those healing words light on your own heart so that you might remember that you are indeed beloved, beautiful, good, and true. This is who you really are, Jesus tells us time and again. These are the words we need to hold on to. They are enough to sustain us on the famishing 40-day journey. 40 days being the biblical way of saying a long time. We are in this for the long haul. Long enough, Bo, that maybe, just maybe, we will arrive at newfound wisdom about ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, there might be some salvaging of something of our common humanity along the way. Jesus says, follow me there.